Hello and welcome to the Global Pet Expo Learning Series panel discussion about the new normal in retail, presented by Pet Business Magazine. My name is Mark Kalaygian and I am the Publishing Director and Editor-in-Chief of Pet Business. I'm joined today by three outstanding retail executives who are generous enough to share their valuable insight on the challenges and opportunities that pet stores have faced over the past year, and more importantly, what lies ahead for the pet specialty retail channel. First, we have Andrew Kim, founder and CEO of Healthy Spot, a 21-store pet retail chain located in California. Next, we have Deb Wilson, Director of Business Development for All the Best Pet Care, a pet store chain that operates 15 locations in the Seattle area. And last but not least, we have Jeff David, CEO of Independent Pet Partners, a company that operates 4 pet store chains in various regions across the United States, including the 54-store Loyal Companion chain in the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, Chuck and Don's, which operates 50 stores in the Midwest, the 40-store Chrysler's chain in Illinois, Texas, Colorado, and Southern California, and Natural Paws, which operates 19 stores in Houston and Austin, Texas. Thank you, Andrew, Deb, and Jeff, for contributing to this important discussion. As we all know, over the past 12 months, pet specialty retailers across the country have faced unprecedented challenges in operating their stores during a worldwide pandemic. In order to rise to the occasion, these retailers have had to make critical adjustments to their businesses while continuing to leverage their unique, established strengths to effectively serve their customers in what has been a difficult period, to say the least. Now, as lockdowns ease, vaccine distribution ramps up, and something that resembles a normal retail environment finally seems within reach, pet stores face a new challenge in developing the right strategies to succeed in a post-pandemic retail landscape that is not yet completely in focus. To fully understand where pet stores are today and where tomorrow might lead, let's go back to the beginning of the pandemic to discuss how we got here. Andrew, take us through the early days of the pandemic. How did business ebb and flow in your stores over the first several weeks? And as a follow-up, when did things stabilize and at what level?
As we approached the 1-year anniversary of when things started happening in March, I think there was just a general sense of uncertainty and fear of the unknown. We saw customers come in and really prepare for multiple weeks or months of supplies and heavy shopping and heavy pantry stuffing during that time period across all goods, with an uncertainty of when they would be back out to revisit us. So we saw a very large spike in March. On the service side, it was unclear if we'd be able to operate. I think that the different counties and cities we were a part of, they were trying to figure out what would be deemed as essential. And so there was a lot of uncertainty there as well. Every day was a bit unclear, and we didn't really get a normalized state until probably May, where we got clarity around the services. Every month after the trough, I would say in April, we started to see business slowly pick up month over month and continue to grow thereafter.
Great. And what about year over year? How have your sales, since April compared to 2019?
Yeah, every month we saw sequential improvements, particularly as the services picked up. I think during COVID, there have been some positive tailwinds for our industry with the explosion of pet ownership and really a focus around the family. And so we saw goods pick up. Our grooming business really took off, as well as demand outstripped our ability to take care of the customer's needs. And now we're trending back to pre-COVID levels.
Great. Looking up the West Coast a little bit into the Pacific Northwest, Deb, is that a similar experience to what you had at All the Best Pet Care?
I would say very similar, with the exception we don't have services like Andrew does. But yeah, we were flying along, in January and February. We just put in a new point of sale system, which was sort of in hindsight very fortunate because it allowed us to adapt quickly to a shop online, pick up in store, and curbside, service model that we didn't have the ability to do before that. But like Andrew, March 13th was when our state went into lockdown, and that's when we really saw the shift. And then for several weeks after, we looked at it more in chunks of weeks. And so for several weeks after, we saw, triple digit increases, which we knew weren't sustainable, and we knew that the high of highs, there were going to be low lows. And it did take until the end of second quarter for things to bottom out, stabilize, and then start to return to normal.
Great. And Jeff, you're unique on the panel in that independent pet partners is really spread out to a variety of regions in the country. From that position, were you able to observe any regional differences in the way the pandemic impacted your business?
I think the consistency was that everyone was different. The rules were different everywhere because there was, as Andrew said, there was so much uncertainty. It was the fear of the unknown. People didn't know what the rules meant for them. The different state organisations were taking a slightly different interpretation of the CDC's view of what was going on. And then different police departments would then have different views as to whether we were part of the essential business group or not. The services teams in different states would have different views to their colleagues in other states. So, I think the one consistency was that it was different everywhere. But essentially, the peak and the trough were the same in every market. We were quite lucky, like Andrew, we had a very pronounced rise and then a very pronounced fall and then a very consistent return. And the only slow return was the services piece. There were a couple of markets where there was very clear advice that the services weren't part of the essential offering. So we were delayed in having them come back. And then there was some debate amongst some of the teams in other parts of the country when they saw what was going on for their colleagues in, say, Illinois. The people in California would say, well, why can't we be like the people in Illinois, or vice versa? So that caused a little bit of, time and opportunity for us to really understand what their concerns and needs were, and then to address those and meet them and try and make it as consistent as possible for everyone.
Great. Obviously, to call the early days of the pandemic, if not the entire duration of this past year, challenging would probably be a bit of an understatement. Deb, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced over the past year, and how have you had to respond?
I would say the biggest challenges always involve people. We have a unique group of employees that are definitely, many of them suffering from what we call COVID fatigue. They're tired. There's a lot of added stress being an essential worker. Early on in the pandemic, we instituted hazard pay, which we knew wasn't going to last forever. And we made it clear that it wasn't going to last forever. And of course, it was quite unpopular when we had to discontinue it when our state moved into a safer phase. So I would say the people pieces have been difficult. The fact that we haven't, to keep people safe, we discontinued our store visits, which are an essential part of our culture. And I think that had a big negative impact on the fact that we weren't able to really see our people, and it created a distance. So I would always come back to the people piece.
And speaking of the people, Deb, I got a lot of feedback from retailers early on in the pandemic that even being able to fully staff stores was difficult in a lot of ways, and even heard of stores being shuttered in some chains temporarily because of staffing shortages. Was it to that level at All the Best?
We were lucky. We never had to close a store, and up until about 3 months ago, we did not have one positive case. We worked really, really hard to keep people safe. And one of our things that we did was we limited our district managers' travel between stores. We put in a 72-hour window between any movement between stores. We shifted our warehouse deliveries to nights only, so we wouldn't have people, bringing something possibly from one store to another. We did all of our merchandising at night, as well as our facilities and maintenance. And I'm proud to say that we've only had one positive case out of 122 employees. and that person didn't get it from work. They got it at home. So we really worked hard to keep people safe. And so we didn't have any stores shut.
Excellent. Jeff, you and I just a couple of weeks ago were talking about the personnel aspect of challenges that came with the pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about what the experience has been across your brands?
Yes, happy to. Firstly, congratulations, Deb. One person testing positive out of 120 is an outstanding achievement and record. Congratulations. We haven't been so lucky. At the height of the pandemic, with all of the grooming staff and other services personnel, training personnel, and daycare personnel that were off, I think we were as many as 400 people on furlough or quarantining. Although the maximum number we had quarantining, which predominantly, Deb, like you, was because there was a 1 or 2 degrees of separation where they think they'd come in contact with it in another aspect of their life, was about 70 people. And then it settled down through the summer mark. We were at about 10 or 12 people that were on quarantine, and people were coming on and off. And in fact, the best thing that happened was when the testing regime increased, and we were able to get more and more people tested. We found that we had an uplift in the number of people that were immediately quarantining because there were more people getting tested and being cautious. But the return to work speed was faster because there was no need to quarantine for 10 days or 2 weeks. And, they'd have a scare, get a test, would come back negative, they'd be to work in 3 days. So there was a high churn of people. But we, like Deb, and I'm sure like Andrew, we had meetings every morning at 7 a.m. To just work out where we were at for the day, who we had to look after, what the people needs were, what we could do to provide support, humanity support to their families if there was a need for that, and how we could help answer people's questions. We established a fund, so our board of directors and the senior management team, and we all kicked into a hardship fund so that anyone that was having difficulty with rent or fees for daycare to get support for their children for education or get a computer or anything like that, we actually raised a $100,000 fund to support the team. Which all came from board members and senior leadership, which was fantastic. Fortunately, we didn't need to use all of it, but it was there to support them. But I think, like Deb, and I'm sure Andrew will confirm, just keeping people calm and sensible and thoughtful and patient was the biggest task.
That's great. And, especially early on, when information was slow in coming in terms of how dangerous this was and how prone people were, particularly in a retail environment. A lot of what I heard from retailers was not only people being affected by getting sick, but the fear of getting sick and people, asking to be taken off the schedule out of concern for their health. Andrew, is that something that you experienced? And how did you handle that if an associate came to you and simply said, I just don't feel comfortable coming into work today?
Yeah, a lot of similar experiences. I think it's two segments. On the retail side, being that we were essential, there were individuals who opted out. They felt uncomfortable, particularly early on in terms of their own health or family members or shared household. And so we had individuals that just did not feel comfortable working in the environment. On the service side, because of the lack of clarity by the local agencies in the state, there was a lot of uncertainty in terms of whether people felt it was safe based upon these public policies to come back in the service environment as well. So we had a broad spectrum. Some individuals were fighting so that we would be able to keep our doors open. Some individuals felt very uncomfortable because maybe their peers or the local agency had made determinations. So there was a wide range of responses, particularly early on. I think those responses became much more muted as we learned more information. We didn't go through as much of the exposure risk in the first wave, but LA, unfortunately, in the second wave, we saw a tremendous spike, and that spike, and knowing coworkers or family members or friends in the environment, that elevated the fear level again that we didn't see. So it was almost like a barbell distribution. The initial spike, there was a lot of fear. Everyone became calm and almost knew how to navigate in the environment. And then the second wave just kind of reignited the fear factor and trying to keep people calm, morale high, and not just from the staff members, but customers coming in with an elevated level of stress because of the environment, et cetera. So just managing through that. How do we deliver a high level experience in a very difficult environment to work in, with new policies and safety and customer interactions that we didn't have to navigate through prior to all of this.
Excellent. My next question is about e-commerce. By all accounts, e-commerce, particularly buy online, pick up in store, home delivery services have been a huge godsend for retailers to be able to continue to operate in this environment. We'll start with you, Jeff. What was Independent Pet Partners' various chains' e-commerce capabilities at the outset of the pandemic, and how have they evolved since then?
So, Mark, thank you. We had e-commerce capabilities in every brand prior to the pandemic starting. We'd had that for about 12 months. It had been an early part of our development after we brought all the brands together. The one thing we didn't have we hadn't completed, was our development of the buy online, pick up in store process within the e-commerce platform themselves. So we obviously had to accelerate that and accelerate it very quickly. That enabled both the curbside pickup and the BOPIS itself. And then we very quickly moved to same-day delivery. So we now have the full offering, buy online, deliver to home, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, same-day delivery, and all of the appointment scheduling for services online. The interesting thing for us, and everyone's experienced, triple-digit growth in online sales, and the penetration of online has become a substantial part of the business. So much so that our e-commerce business is as big as any one of the brands these days, which is incredible in itself. But the thing that really amazed me was the growth of omni customers. And we've seen like a 700% increase in the number of customers that are shopping both online and in store, and going backwards and forwards between the two, and using different aspects of the online offering. So it might be BOPIS today, it might be same-day delivery in a month's time, and then they may in fact come into the store. We've also seen some customers that have forgotten to pick up things when they've been in store with getting their dog groomed the day before, and then have used same-day delivery the next day to get a bag of food delivered to home. So it's become a total part of the offering these days. And the team, the good news about this, I think, is in the past, the difficulty's been getting the store teams to really embrace the online offering, because they were scared that it might be detrimental to their job and their employment. And what they've realised is that it actually all now is interlinked and goes hand in hand, and that it's actually to their benefit to promote it and talk to customers about it and explain it and how it works, as much as it is to be a tool for the customer.
Great. Andrew, was Healthy Spot heavily involved in e-commerce when the pandemic started? And regardless of whether it was or not, where are you today in that part of the business?
Yeah, we had e-com capabilities for a while. It just was not a large part of our business. I think what we were caught off guard by the huge spike. And while we had the capabilities, having the infrastructure to scale up to meet that demand, having the team members in place to do that so that we had timely deliveries, et cetera, there was just a different part of the business that was growing quickly while we were evolving kind of the store format. That was an adjustment. Like Jeff, we saw triple digit increases. And so having a more steady state business that was growing at an organic clip to a sudden triple digit spike year over year, that changes the business pretty quickly. And that was the evolving needs of the customer. So we had to adapt on the fly and add more products to the site, build out our teams for the pick and pack and sending it out, and bring it to the forefront with our messaging with the customers as well, where it was a nice to have, and in the pandemic environment, we felt it was a need to have for a lot of our customers.
Sure. Now, Andrew, is Healthy Spots e-commerce really focused on the markets that your brick and mortar serves, or is it a broader approach than that?
It's interesting. When we first started, it was primarily customers within our area. We saw growth outside of our area slowly prior to the pandemic, but when the pandemic hit, we just saw an explosion of mix of customers. A lot of customers had found us online that had never interacted with the brand prior. And so it just, to us, it became very clear that customers were seeking an online solution. And if they weren't able to find one in their immediate marketplace, they were looking for some solutions online. And so taking care of those customers ongoing.
Great. And Deb, in looking at all the best pet care, it looks, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like you have a pretty broad approach to e-commerce, that you basically look at it as a key to kind of really breaking outside of your regional market. Was that in place, assuming that I'm correct, was that in place before the pandemic, or is that something that's evolved over the past 12 months?
It's kind of a complicated answer, but about 4 years ago, we partnered, being in Seattle, we were approached by Amazon with a new concept that was called Amazon Prime Now, which is a 2-hour same day delivery. And we had signed up for that and partnered with them about 4 years ago. And it had given our current customer base, if they wanted to choose to click and shop, a venue that wasn't a competitor. So that business was growing nicely until the pandemic, and then it just exploded. I'm glad we had it in place. We're very comfortable with how the process works, and the staff understands how to manage it. But it wasn't enough. So we had been fortunate enough to put in a new point of sale system in January, and we were able to accelerate our shop online pickup in store module, which we had planned to do in May, but we ended up doing it in March. Not really well at first, but at least we got it going. And then we've always had another side of our business, which is a United Postal Service business that is primarily private label and CBD. And then we also a little later decided that we would like to have another option for same day delivery, maybe not the 2-hour option. So we again partnered with another carrier and now have our own same day delivery, which doesn't have any affiliation with Amazon. So we've got about 4 or 5 different things. And then of course, the curbside is a small piece of it too.
Great. So all of your deliveries are handled by third parties in all 3 aspects of the business?
Yeah.
Something I've heard, again, very early on when the realization that home delivery was going to be an important part of the pandemic retailing strategy, a lot of retail chains that were working with third parties on a small scale brought it back in some cases just because they saw it as an opportunity to keep it in-house. Others, the third party simply couldn't keep up with demand. Andrew, do you guys do it yourselves, the delivery, or is it third party reliant?
Yeah, we do it through third party. When we first did the delivery, we did it ourselves, but we just found it that there was a lot of logistics partnerships that you can leverage that could meet the customer's needs better, given their ability to scale the technology to connect with the drivers and deliver. We ran into similar challenges. I think everyone's shift to home delivery, the demand outstripped the ability for these third-party providers. Everyone's worked through that, and the solutions are working much better now. But that initial period, I think the systems were just overrun because all of the in-store purchasing shifted to home delivery, and they're just, one, the infrastructure was overloaded, and two, just the human capital out being comfortable to help fulfill the needs. Also, we saw a decline in terms of that. So our third-party partners were trying to ramp up the hiring process because of some of the attrition with the fear of the pandemic.
Sure. And Jeff, obviously, your model being much different with having multiple chains in different parts of the country. I imagine your home delivery needs are very different as well. How do you guys handle that part of the business?
So both pick and pack, we do both in-house and externally. So that makes for interesting times. But it does allow us to benchmark the fulfillment rates from that aspect of home delivery and on e-commerce. In terms of the delivery, it's all third-party delivery groups, predominantly FedEx and Uber.
Great.
We're benefiting from some, one of our shareholders is a large group that enables us to be able to leverage some of their relationships, which has been beneficial.
Excellent. Obviously, e-commerce is here to stay. If anything, this past 12 months has accelerated a process, a trend that we all saw happening for at least the last 5 years. That being said, I'm assuming e-commerce will be part of it, but what are some of the other business practices that you've adopted, Deb, in over the past year that you expect will continue to pay dividends even after things kind of resume some semblance of normal?
I would say probably one of the bigger ones is we have a 7 days a week live chat. We've staffed the live chat, and it's enabled us to help be consistent on both online and in brick and mortar in the customer experience. We're known for the knowledge, pet nutrition and knowledge and health that we give our customers in store. And now we have this additional piece that's online, which supports both brick and mortar, but primarily online. So I would say that's probably one of the bigger things that I see us benefiting from, having been kind of pushed into it through the pandemic.
Sure. Jeff, how about for Independent Pet Partners and its various brands, whether it's e-commerce or other operational elements? What do you think that came out of the pandemic that you expect will continue to be important to you as the months ahead roll on?
Well, I mean, there's huge number of changes in the consumer base and how the customers are thinking about things. I mean, I think Andrew talked about the tailwinds that the industry has with all of the new pets that have entered families since the pandemic started. I think, we thought we were doing a good job in terms of engaging with new pet parents, but I think we're doing a much, much better job now in engaging with new pet parents. And I think the transition we've seen as a consequence of this is that many, many of those pet parents are younger generations who have a different set of expectations around insight, content, knowledge, and the like. And so, in addition to all of the e-commerce trends and the practices in terms of keeping your team safe and informed, and flexible working hours and all of those things that we've had to introduce to help people keep safe and healthy and well, I think we've all had to learn about the changing needs of these new consumers that are very different to the old consumers who are much more tech savvy, are willing, as I said earlier, to engage between a store and online. And so we need to make our engagement with them completely seamless and agnostic. I think that's the probably the single most important change ultimately is that.
Great. And Andrew, how about for Healthy Spot? Obviously, as Jeff mentioned, the way that retailers engage with customers inherently has changed, fundamentally has changed out of necessity the past 12 months. The very strengths that independent pet retailers have enjoyed over the past few years have been somewhat undermined by the difficulty of being able to engage customers face to face. How have you guys tackled that challenge, and how do you expect that to play out in the future?
Our focus has really been how do we translate our experience and the way that we've built communities into this new world. And pre-pandemic, a lot of events, a lot of gatherings, a lot of focus in direct interactions, and that's not the appetite in the current environment, though we think that will return. It's translating that experience across the different platforms. So whether we've designed community events where we're connecting online, trying to educate in a different way than just in store, creating content for our customers as well. We think it's really important that not all customers will have the same needs in this environment. We don't know, how those needs will evolve. So it's important that we push the experience across all of our touch points with the customers to make sure there is a consistency, whether it is with the third party, whether it is an online experience, whether it's curbside. How do we make sure that we're delivering the same consistent experience of Healthy Spot to the customer across all those various touch points? And what we're finding, similar to what Jeff mentioned, is that customers were before, we only do shopping online, or we only do home delivery, or we only come in store. We're finding that those lines are not as clear, and customers want the optionality of being able to interact with the brand across all the different ways that we offer.
Great. And Andrew, you mentioned it earlier, but services obviously a part of that. It's very difficult, if not impossible in some cases, to replicate an in-person experience with a lot of these services. How has your approach to delivering services changed during the pandemic? And do you think that the practices that you've had to put in place will be an important part of those offerings in the future?
We've had to evolve. I mean, the work from home environment has changed, particularly the daycare services. And so as people return back, what does the work environment look like with the flexibility around scheduling? How do we evolve the business to meet those needs in terms of the offerings around there? In terms of the grooming side, pandemic or not, the fur is growing. There's basic needs for the pets. And so that demand is there. How do we do that in a way that can meet the customer's changing needs? So curbside, online booking, how do we do so in a way that is still less stressful for our staff members as they're going through the process, but also with the pets? And so it's just continuing to evolve. Again, our belief is that we're going to have a varying range of responses from customers, some that will be eager to want to come back into the store and interact with the groomer face-to-face. How do we encourage that in a way that's safe for the client and our staff members? And there will be some customers that still would prefer curbside and want to limit their interaction in store. And so we want to make sure both are safe and consistent with our brand standards.
Great. And Jeff, as independent pet partners, obviously, again, services are an important part of your business as well. And I believe we talked about a couple weeks ago things like, even online training services and stuff like that. Do you expect there to be a digital component to your service offerings even after, again, things are kind of moving in the right direction in terms of putting the pandemic behind us?
Yeah, well, as you point out, it's very hard to groom a dog through the internet, right? You can order someone to come to your house, but it's very hard via Zoom to do the grooming or to advise on how to do the grooming. But we have found that online training has been very successful. And there's been a little bit of that news about that, not from us, but from others in the news over the last 6 months or so. But we've we've been flabbergasted at the number of people that have wanted to embrace that and, in fact, bring other members of their families from different households together to experience the training of their dog via Zoom, which is something completely new and something that we would not have expected. But that's so that other family groups that might be providing care to the pet, whether it's the grandparents or the cousins, are getting the same training, so they know how to give the same commands and look after the pet in the same way, because the new pet parents are very concerned that this pet is socialized and has consistent support and love. Which that's something I would never, my crystal ball did not have that one.
Yeah, a lot of firsts, right? A lot of learning going on over the past year. It seems certain to continue to be relevant because a lot of things that, again, came out of necessity, I think will come out of just preference in the future. The convenience of being able to just stop at the store and pick up your order, and it brings other challenges, quite frankly. We talked a lot about the forward-facing part of your business, the interactions with customers and your staff. I'd like to look a little bit about the back end of the business in terms of working with your suppliers. A lot of the buzz I've been hearing throughout the past year has been supply issues from manufacturing level all the way down to the store level. Deb, let's start with you. What has your experience been in terms of being able to keep your stores well stocked and get access to the products that you need?
I would say it's been fairly consistent. There have been some specific brands, and there's a couple of canned food manufacturers that are throwing some challenges into the mix. But overall, our largest distributor at the onset of the pandemic made a financial commitment and added a lot of inventory in anticipation of what was going to happen. And it worked out because we really never had any big issues, nothing that impacted sales. We always had something else we could sell them. And I think overall it's gone better than we expected.
Great. And how about you, Andrew? I've heard some estimates that, the supply is maybe as little as 70% of demand out there, particularly in some of the food categories. Have you guys had any supply chain issues? And whether you have or not, to what would you attribute it?
Now, there's been some constraints here and there. I wouldn't say that we've had a major pain point there initially when there was a spike and pull through of demand, but that worked itself out as the buying patterns normalized. We found early on that a lot of our partners realized that we were all dealing with this together. And so there were creative workarounds, whether the distributor was out, a manufacturer would try to solve through it by sending products directly. So it was the transparency of some of the challenges that were going, frequent communication, and trying to problem solve together to be able to meet the customer's needs. We found our partners were very supportive through all the different challenges we were going through.
Great. And Jeff, again, going back to the fact that Independent Pet Partners has operations in a wide variety of markets across the country, have you had a consistent experience when it comes to the supply chain, or has there been some variations?
Yeah, I think it's been, as Deb and Mark says, everyone realized that we were in this together. And there were issues with, there might have been issues with supply in one distribution center, and then you'd be working to get it out of a separate distribution center. That might be because of an issue in a manufacturing plant, or there might have been a COVID issue, an outbreak in a particular warehouse that needed to be shut down for a couple of days, or there were some trucks that had a problem. More recently, we've had the weather issues in Texas. It's just been one thing on top of the other in terms of craziness, but what it has led to is more transparent communication than ever before, and probably more integrity in demand forecasting. That said, after the first couple of weeks of spike and then the drop off, it was almost like anyone's guess, right? We were all going, who's guess next, right? In terms of where's it going, and so we would make estimates, and then they would have to change, and then we would make different estimates, and they would change again, and we're trying to do that across 160 odd stores across the country. So it was fun and games, but it was all hands on deck doing it. But the good news was that everybody had the right attitude. All we wanted was to keep everyone healthy and safe and sane, because as Deb said, we all knew that there was this chance that everyone was going to go COVID insane. So we just wanted to just keep the sanity, keep everyone calm, be patient, and do what needed to be done. And luckily, I think we as an industry should be really proud that so far it looks like we've survived.
Yeah,
assuming that there's no more outbreaks and people don't relax their standards, as we start getting the vaccinations. But I think we should be proud of where we are.
Great. I think survive would be an understatement for sure for the vast majority of pet retailers out there. I could do this all day. Unfortunately, I see we're out of time. So I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to participate in this panel discussion, and hopefully the audience gets a lot of insight and practical advice that can help benefit their businesses well into the future. So thank you all.
Thank you for having us.